Trapline today. We appreciate you being part of it. We've got a great guest. We've got the incoming president of the NTA, Rusty Kramer. In the meantime, if you are looking for a great magazine, make sure you go to the trappermag.com. Pick yourself up a subscription to the Trapper, and it'll be delivered every month, giving you some great trapping information. But with that, definitely wanted to introduce Rusty here. Rusty, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Alan. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw you at NTA for a little bit. I didn't see you much there, and then I saw you at the FTA, and I said, you got some time, you want to be a part of this, and you were more than happy to give me a little bit, and we're gonna get into it. Tell us how your first week or so has been as the incoming president.
Well, I just got inaugurated, came into office last week, and then I guess I got a crash course because I was home, put out a couple fires, and then 48 hours later, I got back on a plane and went to go represent at the FTA convention, and now I'm home. I spent my first day back just trying to get my email cleaned up and get everything on the calendar. It's just kind of the logistics on having everything done, and so many people depend on you. Can be overwhelming at times.
Well, you're probably going to be well, not that you weren't busy before, but you're probably going to be even busier now, staying on top of everything that needs to be stayed on top of.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, I just wanted to touch base with you. I know that you're just getting into the feel of things, but you've been in that executive branch of the NTA for a few years. What's going on kind of behind the scenes as far as legislation, and you guys are at the forefront along with the FTA and others that do help out in the process, but you're at the ground level fighting for the rights of this tradition, and it doesn't matter really what state you're from. There's probably things you have to look at from states that actually still allow trapping, and even states that actually have outlawed it in the past, certain aspects of it for anything moving forward. But just wanted to see if you could elaborate on what the NTA does and kind of give me personally, I don't think that people recognize or understand how much goes into that aspect of what you're probably going to be doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alan. And I've been the Idaho Trappers Association president for 10, 11 years now. And so I thought I had an idea then, and, dealing with the state level and a little bit of federal stuff. And then I was the general organizer for the last 5 years of the NTA. And the last year, I've really been trying to be John's right-hand man on learning everything. And just when you think you know everything, more stuff gets dumped in your lap. But I completely echo what you said. There's just a tremendous amount of things that go on behind the scene. And we have an executive council of seven people, and they run all of the NTA business from the end of the convention until next year's convention. And some things are voted on at the board meetings at the annual convention. But for the other 360 days of the year, anything that comes up, goes through the NTA executive council. And so there's just a tremendous amount of stuff with all the entire country you're in charge of.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're kind of thrust into that lead position, and probably going to have to put a suit and tie on and head to Washington and do all of that stuff. But we definitely, I know I do, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are watching this, and even a lot of people that aren't watching it, we wish you the best on pursuing that and keeping those people at bay, per se, and allowing us to continue to go out there and enjoy this tradition. With that, moving forward, I want to give or I want you to be able to give a little bit of background. I know that you trap wolves, you trap a lot of different things. I just kind of wanted you to give a little synopsis of maybe when you started trapping and give us a little bit of the kind of the dominant predator that you end up chasing a lot throughout the year.
Well, I think a lot of young boys are that way where I don't fish, I don't bird hunt, you know, because my dad didn't do those things. And so I just grew up just learning over the shoulder of my dad. And still to this day, you know, I started trapping when I was, you know, 6, 7 years old, and then went away from it a couple of years there in high school. And right after, maybe from 16 to 20, and then right back into it. And I still trap with my dad to this day. Every season, he's definitely in failing health, but still to this day, I trap with him every day. And what I really enjoy is trapping coyotes. I'm in the southern Idaho, so it's a lot of desert country. We don't have a ton of water. I do a little bit of water trapping, but I cut my teeth and just really enjoy pursuing coyotes. We got a lot of fox and badgers in this part. Here when they opened up wolf trapping in my area 5 or 6 years ago, started trapping wolves, and we have a reimbursement program here. And so earlier season, I do pursue wolves really hard for a couple months, and then kind of when marten season opens up, trap some marten. And then when bobcat season opens up later in December and we're kind of snowed out of that high country, I switch over to bobcats from that December to February timeframe.
That's cool. You mentioned marten. That's more high country, right?
Yeah, that's where I live is actually kind of a high desert, like 5,500 feet, but it's just sagebrush and rock rims and farm ground. And then if you go just 30 minutes from I'm at the foothills of some mountains though. I go 30, 40 minutes out my door, I can be into wolf and marten country. But my wolf country's a lot different than you get up to the Panhandle, where mine are still like the south slopes of those hills are still sagebrush and the north side, so it's a drier climate. And I'm probably one of the few places that in the tailgate of my pickup, we could have wolves, badger, we see sage grouse and antelope and fox and marten all in the same line. So it's really kind of a high desert, but we get some sage flats up there at 7,500 feet where we're seeing the antelope and sage grouse. So kind of, and badgers, kind of unique. A lot of wolf country doesn't really have that kind of drier. We're on the kind of the fringe of wolf habitat.
Well, yeah, a lot of that wolf habitats. You know, I got the opportunity to go with Paul Anzac, who wolf traps over in Montana. I had the opportunity with him a few years back, and we went out there, and he ended up putting a couple of them in the traps. They didn't come by mine. He had them go by his, not mine. But that territory was big woods, big mountains. There wasn't any of that desert territory, none of that. And that's that kind of tells you how the wolf is able to adjust to different environments and you know, kind of stabilize themselves in a lot of different areas.
Oh, definitely. If there's a little bit of cover and feed, they'll survive, and they can travel a long ways to get to new country. Yeah. I've caught them on the edge of alfalfa pivots before, really? Where they weren't kind of living there, but they were traveling from one big drainage to another one. So
interesting. You mentioned the marten. I'll go to that again. Pennsylvania tried to reintroduce the marten here. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
But they tried to reintroduce the marten here within the last year. And, you know, there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of people for it. It didn't get pushed through. But I would bet that over the next 4 or 5 years, they're going to continue to try and educate people on that reintroduction. And is that something that the NTA gets involved in, or is that something that you kind of are hands off on those reintroduction of species?
So funny you asked that question, and not to go down too deep of a rabbit hole, but the National Trappers Association has they're a 501c6, so we can get involved in lawsuits and things. So we do have our fundraising arm, which is the National Trappers Foundation. It was called we did a rebranding here a couple of years ago. It used to be called Fur Bearers Unlimited, but we wanted something a little more aligned. But that's a 501c3, and so we do banquets, and states have banquets. And we get grant money, and some people, if they want to donate for that can be written off on taxes, donate to that. But that is purely for education, kids camps. They do some women's trapping camps up in Wisconsin, and also for collaring projects. And so I actually, at the NTA convention, the last board meeting in Virginia, just put in for a Idaho fisher collaring and a relocation program that actually trappers are getting paid. And so NTF just wrote a big grant, and so it's going to pay Idaho trappers to live trap fisher, collar them, and move them to a segment of Idaho that our biologists, the Idaho Fish and Game biologists, said could hold fisher. And so this is a great feel-good PR story where literally everybody's saying trappers are all bloodthirsty, murdering barbarians. Here we're trying to reestablish a population.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That was my next question. You had mentioned earlier that there's a bounty on the wolves, or not really. I guess it's not a bounty. Or there's a stipend, whatever that is. And if I'm not mistaken, FFML.
F4WM.
F4WM, which is the organization that will reimburse trappers for the expenses that they're paying, basically, to go out and catch these wolves. And you mentioned it. You think you're heathens and this, that, and everything. Anybody watching this, and especially if you're an anti that's come across this, understand that we're not doing this for any other reason than to help out conservation and wildlife. And it's not a bounty. We're not out there. We don't want all the wolves gone. We don't want all of the raccoons gone when we talk about nest raiders. We don't want those things happening. We want a balance. And I'm going to get Rusty's intake on this because he's at the ground level doing these things and seeing it on the ranches and seeing it in the places out in the West where these wolves have exploded in populations. The levels of elk and moose and the prey species has been decimated by these wolves. Now, not only that, they're also going in and taking out cattle. They're taking out sheep. They're taking out all these things. And I wanted Rusty, if you could maybe talk about that organization a little bit more, talk about that program and the value of that when it comes to those ranches and the value that the trappers give them when they do help out in that process.
Yeah. The group is called Foundation for Wildlife Management. They shortened it F4WM. They are an associate affiliate of NTA now, and I'm actually on their board of directors, and their executive director is on Idaho Trappers Association board of directors. But they found out 10 years ago, especially in Idaho, it is different than some of the Great Lakes states where you've got huge expanses of inaccessible area that, we have an over-the-counter, we do have a tag here still, but an over-the-counter year-round hunting season, and they can't even come close. They were talking 0.5% of the people that have a tag, because everybody at deer and elk hunts got a tag in their pocket. So hunting is just not a feasible way to maintain wolf populations. And so they came out with this program, and what it was is it's paying your expenses. And, coyote prices have plummeted in the West. It was only 5 years ago. They were 120. I was averaging $130 a piece for my coyotes. Now that coyotes are $20, I could still make more money if I was just, I didn't want to have my one bucket list. I could make more money just on a financial side of things, chasing $20 coyotes than $1,000 wolves. Mm-hmm. And so what this reimbursement does is it keeps you being able to trap, and it keeps you out there. And this is funded by that organization. You have to be a member, and their banquets but there's a large percentage of it that's through our wildlife or our wolf control board. And so the legislature sets aside money, and our Fish and Game sets aside money within cooperation with the Cattlemen's Association. So it's just keeping people so they can still check their traps, because it's, the wolves have long travel routes. Yeah. And so many people think, well, just, hey, I know where some wolves are. Set some wolves up here that's 5 hours from your house. And not many people realize, it's not pheasant hunting or steelhead fishing where you just, hey, let's just go trap for one day. You're setting a trap line and you're married to it, constantly checking it, waiting. Like the wolf, one of the wolves I caught last year it was like 42 days till he made a pass through again. But, and like where I trap, it's right in one of our state senators. It's right in the middle of his cattle that I'm trapping. And so, I said this on a public radio interview a couple of weeks ago. People think that it's maybe a little different audience that we're talking to here, but people want it to be snap their fingers and be back to, Dances with Wolves days, where we've got buffalo, grizzlies, and wolves from Oregon to Ohio, and there's 40 million buffalo and all grizzlies and wolves, and everything's living in harmony. But there's only so many wide open spaces for, these large apex predators, grizzlies and wolves and stuff, and buffalo, and people that think that, hey, there's a little spot here, there's just so much ag and subdivisions that they're going to constantly be getting into trouble. They're not highly adaptable to like raccoons and skunks and even coyotes to an extent. And so it is tough. We're at 10 times the federal requirement in Idaho. I mean, and that's with very, very relaxed trapping and hunting seasons. And our legislature is still pounding on the table saying wolves are still way over what you promised. And when they reintroduced them, they didn't realize, one, how far they would, expand into California, Oregon, Washington, and two, how adaptable they've been.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a good point there. They are very adaptable, and it's not just them. I mean, when you were growing up, I guess you were growing up out there, but if a grizzly attacked somebody, we were getting the news back east. It seems to be common news items now where people are having more and more and more interactions, and they're not good interactions. You're not going to win an interaction with a grizz if you don't have something to protect yourself. And some of these areas you're not allowed to carry a firearm. You can carry bear spray. Well, I don't know if that is going to give me warm fuzzies walking through a thicket where there's grizzlies. It's just one of those things where the romanticism of the process, which you kind of were talking about, the Dance of the Wolves, the romanticism of the process, we all want that. We would all love that, but that just doesn't make common sense, or that's really just not feasible in today's practices.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's hard to explain people back east. I shouldn't say just back east, that aren't from these areas, that, I've talked to many, many, many people. I even did a wolf conflict documentary this spring down in Tucson. And I was sitting there talking to a professor from Connecticut, and he's like, oh, I could see a population of wolves in all 50 states. And I'm like, okay, trust me, I'm telling you, there is, I live in a town of 400, and my county's got 1,000 people, and still, there's just not that many places for them, let alone, and it's a tiny populated state like Idaho. You take these heavily populated states, and it's just not even, it's just laughable that they think that they can coexist.
Exactly. Moving forward off of that, what would a normal day on the trap line, on your trap line, what would a normal day on the trap line look like for you? Like, what is if somebody was to come and ride? I know you actually gave a ride along, and I think it was so popular that they 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 did it again, or you've got you donated one and now you got two different times or whatever coming along for the ride, and more credit to you for offering that. That's really a great item for a fundraiser for sure. But what would a normal day, or per se the guys that are coming with you, what's a normal day on the line look for you?
Well, now I just got done with 10 years as being a high school football coach. So my schedule was a little more limited. Like I said earlier about you are married to checking those traps. Now I don't have to be back at 3 o'clock every day for football practice, but we try and leave it. I hate checking traps in the dark.
Well, that if you don't have to be back by 3 o'clock, that'll give you what, an extra hour of daylight now, because it gets dark there about 4:30.
It does get dark. We are Mountain Time Zone, so not quite as much as the Pacific, but it gets, I can't remember before, daylight savings time, it's getting pretty stinking dark by, 5, 6 o'clock. And so we try and leave it first light. And, everything I do, whether it's the leadership stuff or my coaching or whatever I do, I jump in with both feet. And so I try and have as little commitments during that time of year as possible. And but I do need to have to leave myself a little bit of room, because when coyote trapping when we were going hard, it was daylight till dark. And so you're setting traps, it's a full-time job. There is no, hey, I need to go to the doctor, I have a kid's birthday party I need to go to, I have this and I have that. It's trapping season. Yeah. I am checking traps daylight till dark. I try not to go quite that crazy when I know these wolf traps are going to be in the ground. And so if I leave in the morning, we'll travel about 40 miles from my house, and then we'll get on a 4-wheeler, and then we run a loop. And having a trap line get established takes some time. So, on my first day of opening season, I could have, get 25, 30 sets in, and then every day expand. Every time I check it, expand a little more and extend a little more. Because even when you're accomplished trapper, it takes a little bit to get all those sets in and hike in. And so, the mental fatigue, especially with wolf trapping, does get to you when you've got 40 days. And so I do have some fox traps set, and then when marten season opens up, some marten traps. And so I'm constantly trying to add traps to my line every check, that gives you a little extra bounce when you run your line again. You're like, hey, I got those. At least
I got something in the back of the truck.
Yeah, it's kind of that false hope sometimes, but there's a lot more fox and marten and stuff and coyotes on my line. And so it's just in the routine. And if you're a true, I've always said there's either trappers or just guys that trap. And if you're a trapper, it doesn't matter what the price is, or if you haven't caught anything in a few checks, it is just still like Christmas morning, because every time you're like, man, I could have a double black wolves, or it could be, just Skunk City and have nothing today at all, and just a sore back. And so every time's this, hey, next time I got something. And so I enjoy being out in the woods, checking traps, and especially with cell phones now, you appreciate it even more. When we were kids, you got 100 yards from the house, nobody could get a hold of you. But now, once I cross that summit, no one can get a hold of me, and I can just throw my phone down and just take a couple pictures with it, but I don't have to worry about being married to it, getting calls all the time, and dealing with that. And so it's just kind of, you're out in the woods, and I just love being out there and matching wits with the apex predator in Idaho.
One-on-one with nature. That's what it's all about. You mentioned a couple things there I'll touch base on. I feel the same way. There's not one trap that I check at any point that it's in the ground that I'm not just anticipating. I don't care if it hasn't had something for 5, 6, 10 days, whatever. Now, mind you, I'm more of a hit and run trapper, where I'm getting footage in this state and then I go to this state, and I might only be there for 5 to 7 days. So I don't have those long lines out. But when I get traps in the ground, It's every trap is the anticipation of having that animal in there. And then the other thing that I'll mention from that answer there, daylight till dark, the guys that are coming out there with you that won their ride along or whatever you had it called, they better be aware there probably won't be a lot of partying that night because you're going to need your sleep to get up the next morning.
Yeah, I do have some that I could kind of like, will be on a bike. And so if they were getting kind of burned out, I'm going to trot 100 yards up here and check these 3 sets and could yell back down the hill. But yeah, when it's trapping season, I don't think maybe a New Year's party or something. And I like a couple cocktails at events, but I have never checked traps with a hangover. When it's trapping season, it's go time, and that's what I'm focused on. Yeah, I've been a lot of football practices with skunk essence and coyote urine on my legs, and I've had to catch a bus and still had some drops of blood on my boot going to the next football game. And so it's when it's go time, it's go time.
That's the real deal when you show up to football practice and they think you've been hanging out with a skunk all day. That's pretty cool. I'm sure that you had more than one comment here and there. I'm sure of that. Getting back to the NTA and the stewardship of the NTA and the furthering of the tradition, and now you are the man in charge. You're the one that is leading the way for us. And I'm very well aware when people, become president or they lead an organization, you kind of want to make your own mark and your own statement. What I'm asking is, what is your vision? What's your path forward? What do you see that you want to accomplish as this process moves forward? Like if somebody, when Rusty Kramer is sitting in his chair at night, what's going through his mind in the processes moving forward for the NTA, trapping, and everything as a whole?
Well, great question. And I know you being a professional baseball player, I was never at that level, but as a coach, I was always very goal oriented. And I'm a very aggressive guy, and I've been told I'm very nice, but sometimes this aggressiveness does rub people the wrong way. And my biggest thing that I would like to try and get this hurdle over is I was always growing up a fur guy, putting fur up. My dad's stopping and picking up roadkill and, man, try and save everything you could. And the neighbor would blow a gigantic hole. You could throw a basketball through a coyote, and my mom and my dad would sit there for an hour to go sew it up because he didn't want to waste it. And saving skulls and glands and all that stuff. But I need to be realistic where a big chunk of and I'm working on some things from some of my lower hanging fruit is working on some fur committees and some stuff. But one very large thing, and I'm as far from the Southeast, and I've never even seen, I guess I've seen a turkey out the window driving some places. I am not a turkey guy, never will shoot a turkey, but this Southeast focus, and I guess there's a lot of the East, but specifically in the Southeast, on this nest raider, and specifically, the turkey situation where there is this mass influx of new trappers that are getting involved in trapping, just trying to protect their hunting club, their property. Maybe it is coons hitting their deer feeder, but there's this mass influx. And I want to figure out how the NTA can try and get in front of those new trappers. And one thing, it's a little scary that maybe they don't have the same ethics as a person that's been trapping for a few generations, because they're just focused on one thing. But trying to get in front of that side of things, and this wildlife control operators is a huge percentage of the population. And it's kind of the same thing, whether it's a raccoon on a rooftop in a subdivision, it's still trapping to me. Yeah. And I feel like that maybe the NTA hasn't got in front of those two big segments. Now, that's not as sexy as the old school, 80s, hey, we're putting up fur and we're selling them. it's not quite as sexy, and some people are going to deem that, and I've already that, hey, where you're just, you're spitting on the past, and we're not embracing that sort of stuff, and that's not. In fact, I'm a kind of a history nerd and completely love some of that stuff, but I want to be realistic, and I want to protect trapping for the next, 20 years. I've got 4-year-old grandsons, and I would love for them to be able to trap when they're my age. And if we're just going to just not act like that's big segment of the trapping world doesn't exist, would just be crazy to me. And I want to see how we can embrace those guys, get in front of them, and I think it's going to just make our organization that much stronger.
No, I fully agree with you, and there is a fine line there. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. There's a fine line bridging the past to the future. There's a fine line of making sure that people understand the history and know about the O.L. Butchers and the Gary Jepsons and the Johnny Thorpes and all of the things that go into that. But we also, as a group, need to, in my mind, focus on what is more, attainable in today's society. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, yeah, we're you're out there catching fur. You're getting $12 for a muskrat. You're getting, $40 or $50 for a cherry red. Those type of things. And you even mentioned, actually, when you mentioned it, I purchased, as you're aware, I purchased Dakota Line snares about 3 years ago. I probably couldn't have picked a worse time to buy a snare company. Coyotes went from 125 to, like you said, I think they averaged 18 this year. And that's the Western coyote. That's not the Eastern coyote. That's the Western. The Easterns were averaging $50 3-4 years ago. So the market has changed, and there is a viability. Good friend of mine gave me the opportunity to come teach his kids. Cuz Strickland was there at the NTA. He spoke, and he didn't talk on. He wasn't up there showing a set. He was talking on how we can further progress trapping, and I think that your answer is a good direction for not only yourself and myself, but everybody has to understand that line. We don't want to forget the past, but we also have to look at the future and how it's going to benefit not just us personally, but how it's going to benefit the whole tradition, to where your 4-year-old grandkids, when they're our age, are still able to do this.
Yeah, and just in a tiny populated state like Idaho, we've driven our membership to, we've got 1,100 members in a tiny state like Idaho, and we have nowhere near the trappers that a huge state like PA. I mean, they got close to 50,000 trappers, but in the entire United States, the rough estimates, because some states it's kind of hard to differentiate with fur bearer permits.
Pennsylvania is one of those, because you need the fur bearer license to hunt fox, and I'm thinking that's a way skewed number.
So if you Google it, and AFWA has said the numbers are somewhere between 125 to 200,000 trappers out in the United States, and NTA is sitting at 9,000 members.
Yeah.
I will say, like, Idaho has 1,100. And so I'm going to really, really, everybody said, hey, let's push membership, but I'm going to look at creative ways and see if we can expand our footprint into Canada, First Nations, really get a social media director. And, we hate to say it, but social media is a mess of drama and awful garbage, but it's a very cheap way to get in front of a lot of people. And I was just telling at the meetings, when I just left Idaho Trappers Association, where we work closely with the Cattlemen's Association, I was just looking at their magazine when I was just leaving. I was in the airport, and the ad in there, I think it was a vaccine ad or something, it said, quote unquote, we've always done it that way, end quote. the death of any small business. And I was just thinking about that, and everybody saying that, well, we've never had social media, we haven't had to screw with that before, we don't care about the ADC guys in town that are catching squirrels and skunks. Well, we have to continue to adapt, or we're going to be extinct.
That's your base.
Yep.
I mean, that's the base in today's society. I agree with you.
Yep. You just got to continue to adapt. And we can go down a rabbit hole forever, but there's a reason that black-footed ferrets are never going to, they can throw hundreds and hundreds of millions. They're never going to be in Buffalo as expansive as a skunk or raccoon, because a skunk and raccoon can live anywhere. Yeah. And, they are very adaptable, and we've got to just find ways to tiptoe that balance. Because I said that in one of my campaigns, we can't keep doing things the way we did them in 1985. And I had some people just literally screaming at me for that one sentence. And I was not trying to spit on the past, but I'm just like, hey, we've got to continue to adapt and grow. And what you do with your show is maybe not super sexy to the old school guy like myself, but it is the model that I feel like we need to try and wrap our heads around, because you're targeting all this new influx, especially after COVID, the homesteaders, big percentage of the Amish people are very interested in protecting your own hunting club or your own garden and that sort of thing. It's not the traditional thing, but we need to get in front of those folks.
You're absolutely right. And if you can get a homesteader to support the National Trappers Association through a membership, and they're trapping, whether they're setting a box trap or whether they're setting a snare or whatever they're doing to protect their food source, I don't care how they're doing it. If they're supporting and part of that process moving forward, that to me is the path. And it sounds to me like you've got a good vision on it. I agree with you on the social media. I think the social media is a huge factor of being able to get some of those younger generational eyeballs interested. Show them that trapping is something that they can do and create memories. I lost my father 2 years ago. I'm glad that you have your father still going with you, and like those memories are embedded in my brain. That's what continues to drive me. And the organization, the NTA, the FDA, all the organizations, that's the goal of those organizations in my mind, is to keep that furthering generation to generation to generation, allowing anybody who wants to experience that opportunity. So to me, it sounds like you're on a really good path. I like people like you. I am like you. People take me the wrong way sometimes because we're from different areas. I'm from the East, you're from the West, but I like people who say it like it is, and I appreciate the value of knowing where somebody stands every time they say something, and I commend you for that. And I wish you, and anytime you need anything, you need any help in any capacity that I can help you, I'm there for you.
No, I appreciate that, Alan. And I don't know when we're wrapping this up, but one big thing that I wanted to say, one huge, I feel, misnomer that I want to keep really preaching out to these individual states is NTA is, we're not here to be Big Brother. We're not here to just, swoop in and I'm in my normal political, I've come from a state that our governor's pounding on the desk all the time, less government, less government. But the second someone needs us, even if it was just for consultation, Florida called us and said, well, let's talk through some of these changes that our game department, if it's just a phone conference and I'm like, hey, you guys are on the right path, go get them team, to, using our NTA lawyer, which is a trapper. Our NTA lawyer, Mr. Gary Lestico, has been a trapper and our lawyer for 30 years. He's saying, hey, here's some internal issues with our organization. hey, we need a question on our bylaw situation, or this motel told us we can't be here anymore, kicked us out, and is trying to completely say we can't ever use this motel again for our conventions. Is that liable? Should we get a lawyer and do this? He is there to be a consultant. We're there from small scale to, if you got to be like Idaho and Montana, or New Mexico, you're in a full-fledged intervening in a lawsuit where it's an entire having to raise money, everything. We're there from little to big, consultation wherever it is. But we are never ever, if the state's like, yeah, we're not going to pursue this, we don't want to go with body grippers on dry land or whatever, we are never going to comment, respond, intervene where we're not wanted. We want to take the state's leadership's direction and go from there, and we can butt out, we can be a supporter, or we can, and so I just want to know that we're there. If they need us, we're right there. People can get a hold of me. My phone number is going to be the only one on the website besides the offices. Anyone in the whole U.S. can get a hold of me, email me, text me, Facebook message me. It doesn't matter. I want to be there. It might take me a second to get back to you, but I want to be there to support and protect trapping wherever state it is.
Well, you know what? I couldn't say it any better, and I will definitely probably ring your number at one point in time to do that. If you asked about, you don't know how long this goes. If you have a few more minutes, I do want to ask you a couple questions to
Oh yeah,
learn a little bit more.
I was just ready for you to hang up.
No, I'm not. I talk to you all day, brother. What's the hardest lesson that you think you've learned in the woods or out trapping? What do you think is the most valuable or hardest lesson that you learned?
You know, my dad is one that he likes to teach, and I still call my dad. He lives 1 mile from me, and I still call him every other day for, hey, what do you think on this, or advice, or just a reason to call him. But he likes me to still learn from my mistakes, so to speak. And so, you know, watching over his shoulder as a teenager, but then, of course, you're a snot-nosed 17-year-old. You think your folks are idiots, right? And so, you know, hey, I watched a couple of videos, and I think I own the world. Well, so then he's like, pick whatever lure. You take that side, and I take this side. And trying to say, well, why is he catching more coyotes than him? And then finally him saying, you need to slow down and watch the sign and learn what's the difference on my set and your set. And like out in the West, a lot of coyotes are pursued pretty hard, especially with government trappers in the summer. And coyotes are just, you know, naturally kind of scared of their own shadow. They're just nervous animals. And so big backing out here spooks a lot of coyotes. Well, I had, you know, once I started both watching and learning from the animals, and that's where I keep telling people, they watch a demo and then this guy over here does it slightly different. I'm like, hey, this is an art. This is an art. It's like fly fishing or calling elk. You know, it's not 2 + 2 is 4. And so trying to take different people's styles and what the animals teach me and try and morph it into my own style and continue on, whether it's from the tracks or a little skiff to snow, continue to learn and evolve. And, you know, it doesn't matter how long you've been trapping, you can still pick things up. I watched a lot of demos, talked to a lot of people about philosophy, you know, coyote philosophy, wolf philosophy, and be open-minded enough to continue to learn. And you can never be too old to learn and continue to adapt your style.
I think that's a fantastic answer. And actually, you did a great job of answering my next question, which was going to be, what piece of old school wisdom could you give somebody? And you pretty much hit both of them with a nail on the head right there.
I tell people in my demos that we're one of the few people that we actually bury our cat sets. But we use wax dirt because we do get, even though I go south, a little bit south to cat trap. And on my one cat line, I tell this at almost all my wolf and coyote demos, but we're still on the edge. When I lure, some people don't, but we do lure our cat sets. We're on the edge of rock rims or below rock rims, and it's all fenced in, but we do lure it. Well, we had on our one line that was on this big, huge rim, we'd been 30 days and never caught a coyote on this bobcat line. And coyotes are there. I'd see them in a skift of snow. Then they'd pace around, and smell the lure, and we got in that lower country was a good dumping of snow. We got 8 inches of snow, and we had 7 coyotes that check. And I'm like, still pretty snot nosed. I don't know. I was 22, 23, and my dad was like, just sit down for a second and think, what's different? Well, we had it all, some big gaudy blocking all over. You throw 8 inches of snow, the wax dirt was still working. So it wasn't so crowded. And so the coyotes, it wasn't so crowded and you were catching coyotes. But before, it's just like your lawn looks after dumping of snow, you can't find your kids' toys and the hoses and stuff. Well, and then he's like, well, you need to take this, even though we're not coyote trapping, because they were getting late in the year and they're rubbed. We weren't pursuing them. And you need to take this and be thinking on how that applies to your regular coyote trapping earlier in the season. And when you're throwing that big old gaudy logs on both sides there, go a little subtler, and instead of backing it up against that tree and stuff, and just trying to learn from the animals more has really, that's where you, I don't know if that's old school wisdom, but trying to continue to keep an open mind, where I think a lot of people don't. This is not 2 + 2 is 4 a lot of times.
Well, that's old school wisdom. It's that old adage, less is more. Keep it simple. Those type of things are actually going to benefit you more as a trapper than most people probably think. They think they need 3 or 4 different scents. They think they need, a big hole. Yeah, that works sometimes, but sometimes less is more. And you hit the nail on the head. Fast 5. We got a little segment here we call Fast 5. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Single answer. First thing that comes to your head. What's your favorite go-to set when you're out in the field?
Flat set.
Flat set it is. We've all done this. You got a little bigger trap to play with than I do usually. You might have an 850 doing this, but what's the first word or thought that goes through your head when you snap your finger in one?
Probably a curse word.
Yeah, that's usually the answer. What's your favorite animal to chase?
It's still coyote, actually.
Still the coyote. Awesome. And I know it doesn't have to be a bait that's on the market. It doesn't have to be, whatever. But what's your favorite go-to bait? If you could only use one bait for the rest of your trapping career, what would that be?
I was always, like you said, with your dad, he was a big Gorman and Graz guy, from the late 70s and 80s, and Powder River bait.
Powder River it is. That's I believe the Powder River is made with the same thing I make the Mountain Man, which is the Prairie Dog. I believe that's his base for that. Obviously,
I was worried on these old.
He's been around for 50 some years. It must work.
Guy worries these old lure dealers are dying and going out of business. You worry that some of these formulas aren't the same.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Then the last one, what do you think is the hardest animal to trap?
I will say older coyotes. Coyote pups can be pretty easy to trap, but there's a reason that people like Jim Ball catch 125 bobcats a year, and he catches one in cages, Arizona's cage only, and he catches one coyote every 2 years, and they're usually pups.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to get that like you said, they're afraid of their own shadow. It's hard to get them to do some things when you want them to. That's for sure.
Yep.
Rusty, I appreciate you being on here today. I appreciate your time. To me, it looks like the NTA is in good hands moving forward from John, who did a good job. It's in good hands, and I wish you all the best in your new title. And it's not just a title, it's a lot of work. And as I said at the beginning, I don't think a lot of people understand the amount of work that goes into it. And I appreciate you taking it upon your shoulders and moving forward. And as I said, anything you need in the future, you reach out and I'll help you in any way that I can. I appreciate your time today.
No, appreciate that, Alan, and just encourage people, check out National Trappers Association on the website.
Yep.
You know, this is an unpaid position we have, and people always ask, well, what do I get? Well, we are protecting trapping anywhere in the U.S. You've got a great magazine that comes out, and for $40, there's people out there working for free to fight for your to protect and educate on trapping, and you get a great magazine. That seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Does to me too. Be safe.
Well,
enjoy
thanks,
the day,
Alan.
and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Well, that's the end of it today. We appreciate you being part of the Trapline. As always, it's sponsored by thetrappermag.com. If you're looking for a great magazine, get on there, get yourself a subscription, and you'll get one in your mailbox every month with a bunch of different trapping information articles. As always, we hope to see you out on the line.